April 12th will of course be a welterweight showdown as the IBF champion Jaron Boots Ennis takes on the WBA welterweight champion Montez Stanionis. Not only that, the Ring Magazine belt will also be on the line. Very interesting. Not only that, the co-main event is a pretty good one too, as Raymond Ford, the former featherweight world champion, takes on Thomas Matisse, a top super featherweight contender. Overall, pretty good fights on the card. Now let's talk about the co-main event. Thomas Gunnaman Matisse, 22-4 with one draw, 17 wins by way of knockout. Of course, he is coming off of the technical decision loss to Rocky Hernandez. Now, of course, a very interesting one, slightly controversial. So for the sole fact that the fight was stopped due to a cut. And from what the commentary said, the doctor said, oh, it's this cut. They pointed out a specific cut on why they stopped the fight. It turns out that cut was actually caused by a punch, not a headbutt like the other cut. So technically, Matisse should have been the winner, but it didn't matter. But Matisse was doing relatively well in the fight, as once he kind of got into his little groove, he started not dominating Rocky, but he was definitely starting to win rounds convincingly. Slightly hurting Rocky, and really just being in his flow, right? Really being in his element. But besides that, his other wins or his other losses have come by some familiar faces. One of them being against Isaac Pitbull Cruz. That's right, back when he still had one loss. Majority decision, close fight. And some other people he lost to, which none have had more than 2 losses. So he is obviously against good opponents. So 4 losses, close fights, and against good people. Yeah, all of them are close. Of course, Pitbull was majority decision. The other 2 were unanimous, but they were both 77-75. So very close, you know. Probably some people could say that some of the decisions should have gone to him. But of course, he's taking on the former featherweight world champion in Raymond Ford, 16-1 with 1 draw. Of course, he is coming off of his unanimous decision win against Orlando Gonzalez, where he knocked him down. Now, of course, he won the WBA featherweight world championship against Otabek Kalmatov, where he stopped him in the very last round, within 7 seconds of the fight ending. And he was down on 2 out of the 3 scorecards, or he would have lost the fight if he didn't stop him. But the way he lost the belt was to Nick Ball during the 5v5 event in Riyadh. Split decision. Now, of course, me personally and a lot of other people had Ford winning that fight. But, I don't know. I thought it was closer, but no, if I thought Ford won convincingly, but whatever. But besides that, Ford has fought in some top-level opposition, like the former world champion Jesse Magdaleno, Zacharias Lucas, and a very controversial one against Edward Vasquez, or split decision where many people believe Vasquez should have got the nod. But they are both at super featherweight, so they might end up fighting for maybe a final title eliminator rematch. You never know. But of course, Ford has to beat Matisse, and Matisse himself has fought in some pretty good opposition, especially recently against Romero Cicena, 16-0-1, and Christian Tapia, 15-0. Matisse is slightly a slow starter. Not that much, but he is slightly a slow starter. He at least needs 2 to 3 rounds, maybe even 4, to really figure out his timing, distance, and everything. But when he finds it, he is a very effective power puncher. Because Rocky Hernandez, although his style makes you think, oh, he's kind of should be easy to hit, he's not. When his fight against Tejas Giron, Tejas couldn't really touch him, or with anything strong anyways. Now, of course, he was getting hit a lot against Lugo, but that was a weird fight where Rocky thought he was Rocky Chenko. And he was like, wait, why am I being defensive? I usually am the one coming forward. And the second he decided to start moving forward, he won the fight. But he has been getting more defensive recently. But that doesn't change the fact that Rocky Hernandez is an elite level pressure fighter, has a ton of power. Slightly above average defense too. Yet Matisse was managing to constantly get past his guard, block any big punches, and any big punch that did land, he took really well. So Matisse is a durable power puncher, defensive as well, and he's really slick and light on his feet, and overall just has a really good rhythm to himself. Now, of course, Raymond Ford is a slightly pressure fighter, right? He follows it up. He's a smooth fighter himself. He's also defensive. Wasn't really hit with anything really big against Ball or Kalmatov. I mean, obviously they did get their good shots in. It's a fight. You're not going to block or dodge everything, right? But Ford himself was also taking some really good shots against Kalmatov, who Kalmatov, at the time of fighting, only one person ever went decision with him. So Ford himself can take a punch. Now, of course, that means if I were to put some, if I were to say if it goes decision, it's most likely going to go decision. 10 rounds. Here's the thing. I slightly favor Matisse because he's obviously the more natural super featherweight. He has more power than Raymond Ford, and he's overall around the same skill level as Ford, like not too far off. And the gap that is there, I do believe that the height and power can, definitely make the gap smaller, if not insignificant. But I think Ford needs less time to get into his groove. Well, of course, Matisse, once again, probably needs like 3-4 rounds to get into it. And I think that might be why Ford might get the decision. I used to think Matisse was going to win. I still do. But if Matisse starts slightly slow like he did last time, Ford might win this decision. I think it's going to be close, 6-4 rounds. I don't think there's going to be a knockdown, but it will be a highly competitive match, chess match. Because Matisse can obviously create offense on his own, but he kind of doesn't really truly rely on it. But he definitely needs someone to punch first. He's a counter puncher, basically, to some degree. His best work is when someone's coming towards him, which Ford will do. So, give me Ford by decision. Very close fight. I do believe it's a 50-50 fight. And if Ford wins, I probably think he gets a title shot after this, to be honest. And I don't know. I heard the likely opponent might be Foster. That is a top-notch fight. But besides that, the main event of the evening, 2 of the top 5 welterweights in the division duke it out for the unified titles, that being Jaron Boots Ennis, the IBF champion, and Eamontes Stanionis, the WBA champion. Now, of course, Eamontes Stanionis is 15-0 with 9 wins by way of knockout. Of course, he is coming off of a long layoff, that being of 2 years, but he has had one fight, that being a unanimous decision win against one of his rivals, Gabriel Maestre, as he has already fought Maestre in the amateur. So obviously fighting him again as a comeback fight and winning, definitely unrust some bones. But besides that, he's also beaten some decent people. Nothing out of the ordinary for 14 fights or 15 fights. But he has Maestre, he has Dulorme, and he has Butayev. Pretty good. 3 out of 15 wins. Pretty good. But of course, he's taking on arguably the best welterweight in the division, that being Jaron Boots, and his 33-0, 29 wins by way of knockout. That's right, only 4 people have ever gone decision with him, and 2 of them are the same guy. Let me tell you a story. Jaron Ennis was, of course, seen as one of the best welterweights in the world, and when Terence Crawford moved up after his undisputed fight with Spence, people thought he was ducking Boots. And it made sense. Boots looked like a complete package. A power puncher, great shot picker. He could really dodge basically anything. And overall, looked like he could do it all. Not to mention that great footwork kept him really out of any danger. But of course, there was one thing, was that his resume. Nothing out of the ordinary. Some good wins. But people often criticize that his best win was against Sergey Lipinets. Now, of course, that made sense because the other one's good records, but not the same resume as Lipinets, right? But besides that, it was just one little tiny question about him, right? Like, oh no, he's still unstoppable. Who cares if he hasn't fought anyone? It's because they're ducking him, right? But when he first fought Karen Chukachan, Karen took him the distance for the first time in over 6 years, and people started seeing some little cracks in Boots, that being that he couldn't cut off the ring. Anyone with good footwork, just like himself, he struggled with it a little bit, right? But people say, oh, but Karen was running, kind of hard to cut off the ring against people like that, and overall it was not his night, right? But he had the chance to correct his mistake when he rematched Karen Chukachan, and he went decision again. This time was a much closer fight as Karen came to fight. Now, of course, he did drop Karen, and he was deducted a point. But overall, it was a pretty close fight where, once again, Karen was catching Boots with a ton of shots. He was defending himself from Boots' shots relatively well. Now, of course, when they did land, when they hurt, right? But now there's a lot of questions about Boots. Is he as good as people think? And the answer is yes, yes. Karen's just that guy. To be honest, I think we might see a Boots versus Karen 3 if Karen fights Barrios. Because to be honest, I think Barrios loses to Karen, which is super weird to think about. Because like 2 years ago, I would have been like, nah, Barrios knocks out Karen. No, I think Karen beats Barrios now. But besides that, Boots, once again, his defense was, let's just say, might have been overrated, right? A lot of smokes and mirrors, what some might say. He fought people with not the best, I guess, punch selection, where he could easily make punches bounce off his like shoulders and everything. And he did all this over the top movement. You think, oh, look how cool he is. He's moving out of all these shots. He's so good. And then Karen in the second fight started catching him a bunch of times. He's like, that's probably not the best. But besides that, he still is a great power puncher, counter puncher, good footwork. Although not the best Floyd Mayweather defense like people thought before, he still has above average defense. He still has some really good defense. But why am I talking about this? Well, simple. Iemonte Stanionis has relatively not the same footwork. Karen has better footwork than Stanionis, but Stanionis has harder shots, although not the knockout power like one might think. But he does have some good strength behind his punches. He has some decent footwork, nowhere near like Boots or Karen, but it's enough to keep him from getting boxed in or something, right? Prevents Boots from really taking advantage of it, right? But the difference is they kind of complement each other well, slightly, because Boots, although can fight someone on the inside, he's better on the outside. Stanionis, once again, can fight on the outside, but he's better on the inside. He's good at chopping people down, going to the body, which is something we have not seen from a Boots opponents before. Karen, don't get me wrong, he threw some power shots to the body, but for the most part, it was to the head. Same thing with other people like Villa, Avanesian, Lipinets. For the most part, we never seen anyone actually bully Boots to the body, or at least attempt it. Stanionis will attempt to do that. He's a close fighter. He did it against Butayev, he did it against Maestre. He's the one that goes through the war of attrition. He batters you to the body, and he essentially breaks you down, where either you get stopped, or you don't have enough energy to start winning rounds in the second half. But the one, obviously, elephant in the room is that Stanionis has only had one fight in over 3 years. Now, granted, it was against Maestre, which is a great opponent, but one fight in 3 years is something to think about. He may be training and all that, but, he's going to take a little longer to get back into the rhythm, especially against someone like Boots. You really don't want to start jumping in without really, loosening your bones or something, right? Getting your gears to work again. So expect Stanionis to probably not win like the first 4 rounds. But the way it's going to go is, I think it's going to be Boots by stoppage. Probably because I just think it was the fact that Karen was light on his feet, could take a punch. Don't get me wrong, Stanionis can take a punch himself. But I think it was Karen's real just footwork that kind of gave Boots fits, right? He couldn't really catch him because he was just really good at going in and out. Well, Stanionis will probably not be in front of him the whole time. Obviously, he's not an idiot, right? But I think he's going to be hit with a lot more shots. And especially due to his, layoff, I think he gets hit with a pretty bad counter shot in like round 9 or something, right? Stanionis a great fighter, but he has to fight his way back into the inside every round, and I don't think that's going to end well for him. I think I got Boots winning 10th round stoppage against Stanionis. People say he's a live dog, and he is. He would have been an even liver dog if this fight, if he wasn't as inactive. And of course, it wasn't his mistake. He had this fight lined up with Virgil Ortiz. It was rescheduled like 3 different times or 2 different times, right? People got injured, and Virgil moved up. So obviously it wasn't Stanionis' fault because he genuinely believed he was going to fight Virgil Ortiz. But he is now fighting for a unified title. And yeah, Stanionis is a live dog, but you can't just forget the fact that he only had one fight in 3 years. I would have had a 50-50 fight like if this was like a year ago or something. Or if he had more fights under his belts after 3 years. But it's just how it is, Stanionis is a great fighter. I just do think that layoff's going to play a humongous part in why I have Boots winning by stoppage. But anyways, what do you guys think about these fights? Who do you guys have winning? I have Raymond Ford, very close fight. against Thomas Batiste, and Boots stopping Stanionis in the 10th round. But besides that, leave your opinions down below. I'd love to hear it, and I'll catch you in the next one.